Let me share with you something that you should remember and teach your kids. I'm talking about how people can always respond to a situation. Situation number one. I was in an airplane, in the airplane itself, in Chicago, on my way back to Los Angeles International Airport, and the pilot announced that Los Angeles was fogged in. There would be a 2-hour delay. Well, I usually carry a book with me, as I had on the plane, and I kept on the plane, and about 20 minutes later I looked up and I realized I was the only one left on the plane. Everyone else had deplaned, and it's logical. It's a 3-hour flight plus 2 hours more of waiting for the fog to lift, so I also deplaned, and for some reason I got thirsty, so I went into the airport where they serve liquid refreshments. I was into my margarita for maybe a half hour or so, and I have no idea how or why, but the idea popped into my head, what happens if the fog in Los Angeles lifts? The airplane is liable to take off sooner than the 2-hour announce time. I hurried back to the passenger loading area as I saw the plane depart. The gate had closed, and everything I had on there except my book was on that airplane. My seminar equipment, my jacket, my overcoat, everything. So here's the point. I could not change that situation, but I could choose how I'm going to respond to it. And by the way, I learned 2 things from that little incident. One is that the airport announcements don't go into the bars. They only go into the passenger loading areas. The second thing I really knew, and that is that there are certain things you cannot change. You can always, however, respond. So in this situation, I responded by going to the service agent and inquiring when the next plane was. I was fortunate there was another plane 2 hours later. There was another passenger. He was not too happy of a camper because he also missed the plane. I at least had a book to read. When I got back to Los Angeles, I was sort of pleased and proud of myself. I mean, there was all my stuff waiting for me because the attendant had called into LAX to watch my stuff. And again, I sort of felt good because when I was in Chicago, I didn't get aggravated. What good would it have done? Now, yes, if I would have heard the announcement because they said they announced it 3 times, I would have not missed my flight. But the fact of the matter is, there are certain things in life you cannot change. For example, your kids are going to come into your classroom the way they always have. They will have a choice of whether or not they can apply themselves and learn what you are teaching, or they can think about what happened at home. The point is they have a choice. You can teach your kids that regardless of what the situation is that cannot be changed, they never need to be victims. They always have a choice of how they can respond. Similarly, in addition to situations that cannot change, people get stimulated. A nurse, very successful nurse in surgery, with a brilliant surgeon, but apparently who had very few, if any, people skills. During the course of the operation, he asked the nurse for some implement, and apparently she handed it to him a minute or a second or two, a moment or two after he expected it. Right there in surgery, he stopped and chewed her out. Needless to say, she did not have a very good day. She thought about it all day long, thought about it going home, told her husband at the dinner table, who inquired, what time did this happen? And she says, well, 9 o'clock this morning. And he said, wait a minute. It's 7 o'clock now. You're telling me that this happened 10 hours ago and this guy is still making you mad? Eleanor Roosevelt phrased it beautifully when she said, nobody can make another person feel inferior without that person's consent. Regardless of the situation, you can always change how you're going to think about something. And by the way, this nurse decided never again to let this guy control her, never invite him into her car, and certainly never invite him to her dinner table.
In addition to a situation that cannot be changed and a stimulation that you cannot stop, people also have urges. When we were infants, we wore diapers. Hopefully, we will never have to wear diapers again. But even to a certain extent, we can control our anatomy. Among my many publications, one highlights this idea of choice and victimhood thinking. The article is entitled, Rethinking Our Thinking on Discipline, Empower Rather Than Overpower. And of all the ideas and suggestions in the article, this is the one that Education Week highlighted.
Well, how do you do it? There is only one way to do it, and that one way is to change your thinking. Now, there's nothing new about this. My grandmother knew this. When she told my mother, who related the story to me, when my mother was out of sorts, my grandmother would say to her, clean the stove. Well, what does that mean? What's that all about? What it's about is when you focus on cleaning the stove, you're not thinking about yourself. The only way you can change someone's emotion is to change their cognition. So, for example, if a youngster is really aggravated and is out of sorts, you do something like this. You say, Jimmy, put your hands apart like this and count with me. 10, 9, 8, 7. By the time you get to number 1, the kid will be calmed down. Why? Because the emotion always follows the cognition. When I was an elementary school principal, I wish this would happen more often. I had so much fun with it. Kindergarten teacher called the office. I had a kid who was not successful in stopping crying. I reached into my bag of tricks, pulled out a stethoscope, put the earplugs in, went into the kindergarten room, saw the kid crying. I put the end of the stethoscope on his chest 3 times, and I proclaimed him healthy. He immediately stopped crying. And what did I do? That's all I did is I redirected the kid's attention. You never want to say to a person, you shouldn't feel that way. You cannot stop an emotion. The only way you can change an emotion is as if you change the thinking pattern. You change your thinking and the emotion follows. It's critical to understand. When people are in a situation where they're not calm, don't plan on talking to them, because if they're seeing red, nothing you say is going to have any effect on them. People who regard themselves as victims lose control. No one should ever lose control. You can always stay in control if you think in a positive way and you realize you always have a choice. Choice ends when life ends, as I mentioned earlier.
No one should ever go through life with a victimhood mentality. We always have the freedom and the power to choose our responses. If you ask a student to do something and it's not done, the person has made a choice. You may call it defiance, but the point is the youngsters always make choices. We are always making choices, and the more young people become aware of this, the more successful they will be. Unfortunately, this victimhood thinking mentality is in our culture, as in, I had no choice, or he made me do it. Here are another few examples. It's important to remember that becoming responsible is a choice. I taught my students to say, responsibility itself means responsibility, the ability to be responsible. The empowerment of choice is so important for successful teaching and learning that we're going to be spending some more time on the topic. But before we do, let's consider reviewing choice-response thinking and spend a few minutes outlining how you will share the concept with your students. As a reminder, if you plan on purchasing credit for this program, you will find that all the notes and all the investments you've made in time will make it very easy for you